Elira Vantane had spent her whole life at the edge of the Wolf Kingdoms, where the forest met the hills, and the healer's cottage stood alone under an old oak tree. Her mother had been a healer before her, and her grandmother before that. It was a quiet life, filled with the smell of crushed herbs and the sound of boiling water, and Elira had never wanted anything more than that. She did not dream of palaces, she did not dream of crowns, she dreamed only of curing the next fever, setting the next broken bone, and watching the seasons change from her small window. That peaceful life ended the day 2 royal guards came pounding on her door, breathless and afraid, begging her to come to the castle at once. The king's sister was dying, they said. No physician in the palace could save her. Elira almost refused. She was not used to palaces, and something in her gut told her that walking through those gates would change her life forever, but she could not turn away from someone who needed help. She packed her herbs and followed the guards into the heart of the kingdom. The castle of King Thornwick Draven was larger and colder than anything Elira had ever seen. Stone walls rose high into the sky, and wolves in fine armor stood at every corner, watching her with sharp, curious eyes. She was led straight to a chamber where a young woman lay pale and shaking, her breath weak, her skin damp with fever. Elira did not waste time with questions. She examined the woman carefully, checked her pulse, looked into her eyes, and began preparing a mixture of herbs that the royal physicians had never even heard of. She worked through the night, boiling roots, grinding leaves, and whispering calm words to the frightened woman. By morning, the fever had broken. The king's sister opened her eyes and asked for water. Word of the miracle spread through the castle like wildfire. By midday, King Draven himself came to see the healer who had saved his only sister. He was tall, with sharp eyes, and a presence that made the whole room grow quiet. Everyone bowed when he entered. Everyone except Elira, who was too tired and too focused on her patient to notice royal customs. Draven studied her for a long moment. Most people trembled in his presence. This woman barely looked up from her work. It intrigued him more than he expected. "You have my gratitude," he said. "Ask for anything, and it will be yours." Elira wiped her hands and finally looked at him. "I only ask that she rests for 3 days and eats warm broth twice a day. That is all I need from you." The king almost smiled. It had been a long time since anyone spoke to him so plainly. Over the following weeks, Draven found reasons to visit the healer's quarters, first to check on his sister's recovery, then simply to talk with Elira. He found her honesty refreshing. She never flattered him, never asked for gifts, and never pretended to be impressed by his title. She spoke to him as if he were simply a man, not a king, and somehow that made him respect her more than any noble in his court. Weeks turned into months, and the king's visits became something the whole castle noticed. Rumors spread quickly among the guards and servants that the mighty Alpha King had grown fond of the quiet healer. Elira herself tried to ignore the whispers, focusing instead on her work, but she could not deny that she had grown to enjoy their conversations. Draven was intelligent, thoughtful in ways she had not expected, though there was always a hardness beneath his words, a shadow of the burdens he carried as king. One evening, during a formal gathering of the Alpha Council, Draven made an announcement that shocked the entire hall. He declared that Elira Vantane would become his chosen mate, the future queen of his kingdom. Every eye in the room turned to her. Some looked with envy, some with respect, and some with pity, for they knew what life inside a crown truly meant. Elira stood frozen, her heart pounding. She had never asked for this. She had never wanted a crown, and in that moment, watching the king look at her with such certainty, she realized something important. He was offering her a decision that had already been made, not one they were making together. She thought of the years she had spent watching kings and queens from a distance, how their choices were made for them by tradition and politics, how kindness was often the first thing sacrificed once someone sat upon a throne. She had seen Draven make hard decisions as a leader, decisions that were sometimes cold, sometimes necessary, but always without hesitation, without seeking anyone else's voice. Could she truly live a life beside a man who ruled through certainty alone? Could she watch her own voice slowly disappear inside the walls of his kingdom? Before the entire hall, with every noble and warrior watching in stunned silence, Elira did something no one expected. She thanked the king for his kindness and his honesty, but she declined his offer. She said that she respected him deeply, but the throne was not a life she was meant to hold, and love, she believed, should be chosen freely by both hearts, not announced to a room full of witnesses. Then she turned and walked out of the hall. Gasps followed her through the corridor. No one in living memory had ever refused an Alpha King, let alone in front of his entire court. Draven stood motionless, his pride wounded more deeply than any blade could cut. He was a king used to obedience, not refusal, and her calm rejection echoed in his mind long after she had gone. News of what happened could not be contained within castle walls. Within days, the story spread to every neighboring territory. The healer who said no to a king. Different kingdoms reacted in different ways. Some found it foolish, some found it disrespectful. But many, especially those who had grown weary of forced arrangements and political marriages, found it fascinating. Here was a woman who chose herself over power, who valued her own voice over a crown. The first to seek her out was young King Ryan Calder of the Ashwood Pack, a longtime rival of Draven's kingdom. Ryan arrived at her cottage with a modest gift and an honest request, hoping to understand the woman who had captured the attention of every court in the land. He found her exactly as the stories described, calm, intelligent, and unimpressed by titles. "I did not come to win your heart through gifts," Ryan said as they sat outside her cottage. "I came because I wanted to understand a woman brave enough to say no to a king." Elira appreciated his honesty. They spoke for hours about leadership, about the responsibilities of guiding a kingdom, and about the loneliness that often came with power. Ryan admitted that he, too, felt trapped by the expectations placed upon him since birth. Their conversation left them both with something rare: mutual respect, without demand or pressure. Not long after, an emissary arrived from the Frost Court, representing the cold and calculating Prince Kael, ruler of the Northern Territories. Kael did not come himself at first, sending instead a letter that spoke plainly of his admiration for her intelligence rather than her beauty. He wrote that he sought a partner who could challenge his thinking, not simply agree with his decisions. Curious about a prince so different from Draven, Elira agreed to meet him. When Kael finally visited, she found him quiet, thoughtful, and precise in his words. He asked her opinions on matters of trade and justice, listening carefully to her answers, instead of simply waiting for his turn to speak. It was clear that his court valued strategy and careful judgment above raw dominance, and Elira found herself intrigued by the contrast to everything she had known of royal life. Then came word from the Southern Territories, where Queen Sable Marrow ruled a kingdom built on cooperation between equals, rather than single rulers holding absolute power. Sable's messenger arrived, not with a proposal of marriage, but an offer of partnership, an alliance built on shared purpose rather than romance. Sable admired Elira's courage and believed her healing skills, her calm leadership, and her fairness could benefit both their peoples if they worked together. Meanwhile, back in his own kingdom, King Draven struggled with his wounded pride. He could not accept that a simple healer had refused him, especially now that other kingdoms sought her attention. He sent his own advisors to speak with her, hoping to convince her to return, believing that perhaps she had simply been overwhelmed by the suddenness of his announcement. But each visit only confirmed what Elira already knew. Draven still believed love could be commanded, not earned, and that belief was exactly why she could not accept his offer. As word of the many kingdoms courting her favor spread, some rulers whispered that Draven had lost control of the situation entirely, that his own actions had created a rival stronger than any army, a woman whose heart could not be forced, and whose respect had to be earned through patience and honesty. Elira, for her part, remained remarkably steady through all the attention. She continued her work as a healer, tending to villagers regardless of which kingdom they came from, mediating small disputes between neighboring farmers, and quietly building a reputation as someone whose fairness could be trusted by everyone, not just the powerful. Slowly, without ever seeking it, Elira became something unusual in the wolf world, a neutral figure, trusted by rival kingdoms alike. Leaders who had once fought over land and pride began sending their people to her for advice, believing her honesty made her judgment more valuable than any political alliance. Recognizing this unique position, Elira made a decision of her own. Rather than choosing between the many suitors seeking her hand, she proposed something entirely different. She suggested a new kind of alliance, one where Ryan, Chaol, and Sable would work together not as rivals fighting for her heart, but as partners, united by mutual respect and shared purpose. She would remain independent, leading her own small territory built on fairness, cooperation, and consent, while working alongside each of them as an equal, rather than as anyone's possession. It was a bold idea, unheard of among the proud wolf kingdoms. Some scoffed at first, believing no woman could hold such influence without a crown or a king beside her. But Ryan, having grown fond of her honesty, agreed to support the idea. Chaol, always drawn to clever solutions, saw the wisdom in an alliance based on cooperation rather than possession. Even Sable, whose own kingdom had long practiced shared leadership, welcomed the chance to formalize their partnership. Together, they built something new, a small territory led by Alira herself, supported by allies rather than owned by any single ruler. It became known simply as Havenwood, a place where wolves from different kingdoms could seek fair judgment, healing, and guidance, free from the politics and power struggles of larger courts. King Draven watched from a distance as Havenwood grew in reputation and respect. He realized, too late, that his attempt to claim Alira as his own had instead created the very thing he feared most, a woman whose influence spread not through force, but through the simple, unbreakable strength of being true to herself. In time, even Draven came to understand the lesson Alira had taught the wolf kingdoms without ever intending to. Power without kindness could command obedience, but never true loyalty. Love could not be announced or forced into existence. It had to be earned, patiently, honestly, one true moment at a time. Alira Vantane never wore a crown, yet across the kingdoms, wolves spoke her name with more respect than they gave any king or queen. She had walked away from the highest throne offered to her, not out of pride, but out of a deep understanding that a life built on someone else's terms was no life at all. And so, in the quiet cottage where it all began, beneath the same old oak tree, Alira continued her work exactly as she always had, healing the sick, guiding the lost, and reminding every kingdom that dared to listen that true strength was never about being chosen. It was about choosing yourself first.